Good evening, friends, neighbors, countrymen, and barrel-chested freedom fighters all around the world. It's time for some more nuggets of wisdom from your favorite crotchety old paratrooper, and this is me and my 2 cents for the day. I've been asked to do some more military content, and I'm going to do it. I just haven't had the time. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about some stuff I'm seeing on Ukraine. I'm not going to get down in the weeds on it. It's all there, plain to see, but some people just can't see the trees for the woods. Uh, let's talk about Ukraine. First off, kudos to the Ukrainian forces. They're doing very well, doing much better than everybody anticipated. They seem to be well motivated, well trained, and are using some out of the box tactics to defeat their enemy. On the other hand, the Russians have kind of proved themselves to be a paper tiger. Good example being, well, let's use their use of armor. If you watch a lot of videos, you will see their armor tends to be deployed with either minimal infantry support or none, which makes them extremely susceptible to armor hunter-killer teams. And that makes literally no sense. Going back to World War II doctrine, Russians integrated infantry and armor very well. They seem to have forgotten a lot of those lessons. We're also seeing some people, armchair experts, talking about how poorly Russian tanks are. Well, there's a difference between Western tanks and Russian tanks because they're both use different design philosophies. Russian tanks are designed to be very reliable with minimal maintenance, and they don't expect a long service life. Whereas American tanks or European tanks, they tend to be upgraded and have long service lives and are continually being improved. The Russians, because they have so many, tend to make them and rarely get around to upgrading them. But the biggest problem with Russian armor is the way that it's being employed. I dare say if you had a Western-style professional military using Russian armored fighting vehicles, tanks, APCs, whatever, conducting a similar campaign, I would say the results would be much better. Because it all goes back to the heart of the Russian military. They lack a professional NCO corps. Generally, in a Russian platoon, the officer is the leader. He may have 2 or 3 years of experience and schooling, but there is not, like in the American Army, that squad leader who's got 7, 8, 9 years in, or that platoon sergeant who's got 15 years in, being a grunt there. Instead, you have basically a well-trained amateur, and I'm being generous, a well-trained amateur leading a bunch of people who are beginners. And that's one of the reasons the Russians keep getting creamed. I've watched some video of their infantry in action, and man, it's sad. I watched a video which they made contact, and I don't know which unit it was. Looked like a motorized rifle unit. They got out and they were just milling around. There was no decisive action. No one was taking charge. And you go to the American Army, if someone don't take charge, there'll be an E4 taking charge and making stuff happen. But again, it goes back to the Russian military culture. Their conscripts are not particularly well trained. They're not particularly well treated. If you think being a private in a 1980s Ranger Battalion or Airborne unit was a miserable experience, you ought to try being a conscript in a Russian Army unit, because you're basically a dog and a slave to those who have a little bit more time in service to you. It's pathetic. And it's not conducive to building a well-trained professional combined arms force. And that's one of the biggest problems the Russians have. Of course, the other big problem is corruption. Their units are routinely, they don't have the fuel they need to train. They don't have the logistics. It's just horrible. I mean, they're set up for failure. I mean, they did look like a paper tiger last year. Or excuse me, they looked like a tiger last year. Now we're seeing they are a paper tiger. I'm also seeing some other stuff. I was looking on some gun forums, which I thought was amusing. Uh, People were talking about how the AK-47 is not a viable platform anymore because the Russians are deploying their AK-47s without optics, without lasers. Well, you know what? I love optics. I've carried optics on my issued weapons for the last 20 years, about almost 20 years, and I love them. You know, red dot, ACOG. I mean, they definitely help win the fight. And the same with our lasers and our ability to fight at night under night vision. But just because you don't have that stuff doesn't mean you can't be effective. You can have all the toys and bells and whistles in the world, but if you got tiny heart syndrome, you're going to lose. A good example being the Afghan National Army last year when their logistics was cut off and they realized they were being abandoned by Big Brother. They got tiny heart syndrome and folded like house cards. And you're seeing similar things with the Russian army because, again, it goes back to lack of professional NCOs, corruption. You treat your Joes like garbage, they're not going to fight for you. But getting back to about the conversation about the AK, it's still a viable platform. And it's not the gun, the toys, and the bells and the whistle. It's the man behind the rifle, the training he's got, and the discipline that he has. That's what makes a winning professional soldier. But there's a lot of people on YouTube with opinions, just like me. And this is my opinion, and you can either like it or not like it. It doesn't really matter. But, all right, if I've said something that kind of interests you, please comment, like, or subscribe. And if you don't like it, oh well. There's more wacky poop coming down the pipeline. So, all right, freedom fighters, let's watch our six. Let's continue to train. And God bless America.